Are you ready to see the only winter thriller books you could ever need? Yeah, you are. Welcome back to Francesca's Books. My name is Francesca, these are my books, and here we talk about all things thriller books. And today we are on Bookmas Day 4. I hope you guys are enjoying Bookmas so far. I know I am, but this is the first time I've ever done it, so let me know if it's something you'd like to see every year. So these are my top 18 winter thriller books that I think you should pick up at least a few of this year. We have the majority of them being winter thrillers, and at the end I have a few Christmas thrillers, which are the only ones I've ever enjoyed. Spoiler, there is only 3. It is a small pool. If you enjoy this video and love everything thriller books too, don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more. The very first book could be none other than No Exit by Taylor Adams. I think this is one of the most well-written, well-crafted, fantastic plot twist timing wise books in the whole winter thriller space. I know that's a bold statement, but I stand by it. It looks so nondescript from the outside, and I believe this is an independently published version. Either way, the cover is shiny, and I really wouldn't have picked it up in a bookstore if it wasn't for my good friend Sammy recommending this to me way at the start of my reading journey. We're following a group of people that get snowed into a service station, technically a gas station because they are in America, and they're kind of just like, maybe this is the vibe. They're just chilling, there's only 5 of them, until one of our characters finds a little girl locked in one of these strangers' vans and is like, yeah, this ain't good. Since there's such a small character pool as well, this one really hits because you know each of these characters so well and you're still thinking it can't be any of them. The way the action built as well in the last quarter of this book was just so rewarding, as was the end. This was just one of the most satisfying winter thrillers I think you could pick up. What an opener. Next we have another no-brainer when I was thinking about the best winter thriller books, and that is Rock Paper Scissors by Alice Feeney, and I think quite a few people do recommend this one at this time of year, but I can't help but not. We're following a married couple who go on a weekend getaway in the Scottish Highlands. It's very snowy, it's very creepy. They're trying to save their marriage, but as you can imagine, things go south very quickly when they start hearing noises outside. I absolutely love that this is written from a few points of view as well. So we have Amelia and Adam, who are main couple in the story, and then we also have letters from the wife every year of their marriage. So 5th anniversary would, and then she's written a letter about that. I love that. I thought it just really added such another layer to it. I absolutely love this book. The twist, oh my god, the twist literally threw me in a spin. I was beyond obsessed. Obsessed doesn't cut it when I talk about this book. Alice Feeney really is the woman of the hour at this point. She is just, she's doing good. Next up, if you want something a little bit lighter over the winter period, I have 2 Frida McFadden books to recommend. The first one, of course, being Never Lie. In this, we also have a couple who are snowed into a really big house, actually, but one they were going to view to potentially buy, and then they get there and they can't leave. So they think, well, we may as well play house and just see how much we actually like it. The real estate agent couldn't even get to them. Sounds great, doesn't it? Not creepy at all in the dead of winter in the middle of nowhere. And that is precisely when they start seeing food going missing, paintings moving on their own. It's a whole thing. Instead of this just being a classic snowed-in story, I really like the turn that Frida took. So the previous woman who lived there was a doctor, and she was a therapist and kept all of her patients' files on tape. So what do you think our main couple do? They find them and dig into the past. This was just such an easy read. It was a gripping read. The plot twists were fantastic. I would definitely recommend it. Another Frida McFadden book that sprang to mind as well, though, was The Crash. This was her 2025 release, but back in January, and purely because of the snowy, wintry, remote setting vibes. So in this, we have Tegan, who is 8 months pregnant, and her car breaks down on the side of the road when a couple decide they're going to be so nice and bring her into their home because they live nearby, and that is when chaos starts. But she basically had no other options, right? She was in a broken down car and she was pregnant and she was fearing for her safety. She was in 3 foot of snow. I don't know whether I'd make the same judgment. Probably not after all the thriller books I've read. Next up, I have a couple of books that are very remote, cabin, secluded, kidnappy type vibes. So they're not technically winter, but they just scream winter to me. And the first one is That's Not My Name by Megan Lally. This is the only young adult thriller that I've read and absolutely loved. Oh, it was absolutely brilliant. When a thriller's YA, the author can't lean as heavily into the, I guess, violence and the seriousness of the topics. So they lean more into the emotional side of it. And I think that really just hit home as a one-off. I don't think young adult thrillers, for me personally, would be always my taste. But for this one, was great. So we're following a girl who again wakes up on the side of the road and has no memory of who she is. So luckily she manages to get herself to a police station just when her dad turns up to come and pick her up and is like, I've been so worried about you. And then we have another point of view of a teenage guy who got into a fight with his girlfriend and then his girlfriend stormed off, never to be seen again. I think this was just so fast paced. I absolutely loved it. And even though some of the dialogue was very teenager, don't get me wrong, it was, especially on audio, I think the voices did sound younger, so maybe if that would bother your reading experience, I would read it physically. Then we have The Good Girl by Mary Q. Beaker, and this follows a woman who goes to a bar on a night out and she meets this guy and decides to go home with him. He was actually sent there on a mission to kidnap her, but then once he realises that he doesn't want to kidnap her, but it's too late because he already has. So they enter this stalemate of basically just living off the grid together. There was also another couple of points of view, one of them being the detective's point of view, and there was also a before and an after timeline, which worked perfectly for this story. I feel like the concept itself isn't really giving anything groundbreaking, but the way it was executed was wonderful. I rated this one 4.5, and I remember at the time being like, this is a new favourite by this author. This one works so well over the winter period because there is a lot of locked in, snowed in vibes and a lot of description on the setting itself. Then we have The Guest List by Lucy Foley. I think technically The Hunting Party would fit better here, but I haven't read it, so we're going with The Guest List. However, they both are very locked room, someone's been unalived, let's work out who's done the unaliving vibes. And as you can tell by this, it ain't particularly good weather. In this we're following the bride, the plus one, the best man, the wedding planner and the bridesmaid. And throughout we're trying to work out who has motive to commit the unaliving. My only tiny thing with this book was we didn't know who had been unalived right until the very end. I feel like this would have worked better if we'd have known that at the start and then understood the motives more, because the motives couldn't really come out until we knew who was unalived. Either way, for the vibes alone, this was a very dark, gloomy read. It would be perfect to read, actually. I'm just thinking on a Saturday night when it was dark and it was raining. It's definitely that kind of book. You could also read this in one sitting for 100%. I literally did in my recent 24-hour reading vlog, and I think that really added to the experience. And then with another remote setting, but not quite as locked in, we have The Only One Left by Riley Sager. And although this isn't strictly set over the winter, this is the perfect winter vibes. And also, you don't always want a snowy setting or a Christmas theme, so this might be good to break up that sort of description in the books too. But don't get me wrong, it is dark. It is very dark. We're following a woman who is a caregiver and goes to care for a suspected unaliver called Lenora Hope at this cliffside mansion in the middle of nowhere. But Lenora is only suspected, she just wants to tell her side of events. So when the caregiver Kit brings a typewriter into the mansion, she can finally tell her version of the story. And what I loved so much about this is she's telling a story that took place in the past, of course, quite a few years ago, but we're also getting these characters in present day because they're still in the house and living with her and caregiving for her. So like the owner of the house or the driver or those types of people. This was twisty beyond belief and is hands down my favourite Riley Sager book, so with that atmosphere I couldn't not recommend it here. And then back to a more locked in setting, we have An Unwanted Guest by Shari LaPenna, and I'm gonna be straight up on this one. It is an Agatha Christie style murder mystery. This is less a thriller. However, I know some of you guys do enjoy that side of thrillers. I wouldn't reach for it, but at the same time I can appreciate the goodness in it, especially now and again. We're set at this really small luxurious inn in the middle of nowhere, of course, in the forest, where some guests are coming to detox and just have a nice time for the weekend. And that is when a storm starts raging, as they always do. You'll sense a very common theme here in this video, and they get cut off from the rest of the world. So suddenly this group of people have gone from complete strangers to, are we going to be okay? Love a little trauma bond. But then it gets so much worse when the first body is found and they realise that there is a killer amongst them. This is also set roughly over a 24-hour period, so if you like books that are set in a night, you will really, really like this one. In that breath, I would kind of put these two books together. I feel like they are similar but different. Then we have one of the most underrated winter thrillers, because why this author has not got more hype, I have no idea. But we have The Split by Sharon Bolton. I non-stop talk about The Pact by this author, even though I read it about 4 years ago. It was so good. This is the only other book by this author that I have read, but I loved it. This is one that you have to give a chance. It's not going to be a super fast pace from the very beginning, but the payoff is so rewarding. So there's a few point of view changes in this, but the main concept is we're following Felicity, who is a glaciologist. Yeah, I didn't know what that was either, but she basically studies glaciers, would you believe it? So she's basically trying to outrun her ex-husband who has just come out of prison because she thinks that he's after her and will go to the ends of the earth to find her, basically. But we also have another complete point of view of her in therapy, which is what really brought this book back for me. I think if it was just off Antarctica setting throughout the whole book and her just fearing for her life, that wouldn't have been enough for me to even give this recommendation in the first place. I feel like the therapy scenes added to this in such a different way. Like, what a crazy dual point of view. I can't really say much more than that about this one without giving way too much of it away, but if you want that really cold feeling with more of a depth to it than being a locked room thriller, this one should be the one you go to. Next we have Geneva by Richard Armitage, and this played out so cinematically in my head, like this would make the perfect film. There was also a lot of bioscience in this as well, which was really to my taste. I kind of personally, not specifically in my thriller books, but either way, I just really enjoy the conversations around it. So we've got a married couple where our wife is a very successful scientist. She's had the most incredible career, but now she has early onset Alzheimer's. So her and her husband decide to go to Geneva to test out this new biotechnology. When she's there, she's asked to hold a conference and her symptoms are just getting worse and worse, and she starts to get to the point where, like, is this my brain or is this the people around me? I think for its thriller plot, this was good. I think for the other things that I've mentioned, that is what made it amazing and one that I would recommend to you guys. It's set in Switzerland as well, so you've also got that snowy vibe of winter, like exactly what you want. Then we have The Institution by Helen Fields, and I love this. This is still the only book that I've read by this author, but I really should dive into more because I was so surprised by this. I think sometimes you pick up books and they're not super highly anticipated on your TBR, and then you think, that was the best surprise. You know, sometimes when you hear a lot of hype around a book, you already go in with like an expectation that's here. With this, I just hadn't really heard anything in general, so my expectation was here, but it was actually a here book. Okay, firstly, we have a map. Okay, if that doesn't convince you, nothing will. So in this, we're following Connie, who is a forensic profiler, which I think adds the most wonderful spin away from it being a detective story. And she goes into this super high security locked prison to try and find a missing baby. So a nurse has been unalived, but her baby is still somewhere, and she knows if she can get close to the prisoners that she'll be able to find out exactly what's happened, but to do so she has to go in as a prisoner herself, like technically. But as you can imagine, even though she's there as a prisoner, people treat her as a prisoner, which is, I guess, the point of the book, but even the staff, so it gets messy very quickly. I think the pacing of this was absolutely wonderful, and I think the overall outcome, it was just like nothing I've ever really read, and I think that's why I was really impressed by it. The scenery was so dark, gloomy, grey. There was a scene at one point set outside the prison on the prison grounds, and that was just like murky. I was like, I'm so happy to be wrapped in my blanket right now. Guess what else there was? A little romantic subplot. This is technically the second book following this female main character, but I like the concept of this one so much I didn't read the first one first, but if you wanted the full experience you definitely could, but I didn't, so I don't think it's essential. Then we have The Woman in Cabin 10, which is a book I've recently read by Ruth Ware, even though I've not read many of her books in general at all, but on this we're following a Scandinavian cruise, so I feel like it's the perfect read for this time of year. You wouldn't think it was set in winter, I don't think, unless you'd read it, because the concept obviously follows a cruise ship, which I would picture as like Caribbean or Mediterranean, but alas, it's cold, it's freezing, and our main characters are fighting to survive. So Lo is a journalist who is covering the first voyage of this really luxurious small cruise. There's only maybe like 10 people on board, and they're going from England to go and see the Northern Lights somewhere in the North Sea. But then as she's recovering from her own trauma, she sees somebody being thrown overboard in the middle of the night. So of course sounds the alarm, and everybody basically gaslights her into telling her that she didn't see anything. So she starts thinking, well, did I or didn't I? But our girl is nothing if not determined, so she fights to the death that she saw this. This has now also been turned into a film with the same like cold, gloomy vibes if you want to go and watch that, but I will caveat that they are slightly different, the book and the film. They haven't done a carbon copy, so I would maybe watch one or read one. I don't think doing both is necessary. But in terms of the book, I absolutely love this. I gave it 4.5 and I just thought maybe I do love Ruth Ware after all. Then I did tell you that Alice Sweeney is the woman of the hour. I actually have a second book by her in this list, which I didn't even realise whilst I was writing it. But we have Beautiful Ugly. This came out in January and would be a perfect January read. Probably not so much December. I feel like this is a good January pick when you're kind of depressed and cold. So we're following this author who is on the phone to his wife one day, and she is driving and she isn't harmed, but she just stops talking, and then he goes to try and find her car, finds it, she's not there, the phone's there, everything's there apart from her. So he is like, well, she's not unalived because she's not here, but she's also not here. So a year later, he is not in a good way. He's trying to come to terms with his grief, trying to find out what happened, but at the end of the day, he still has work to do. So he goes to this remote Scottish island to try and finish his most recent book because he needs the bag, like he needs to get paid. But it was actually his agent that recommended this specific Scottish island. So when he gets there, he starts investigating what could be going on. I don't think my description of this book does it justice in any way, shape or form. The writing in this was so beautiful. The messaging was incredible and the plot twists were fantastic. And it really is a cozy by the fire winter read. This isn't like a summer happy read. Also, how beautiful is this cover? Like, this is one of my favourite covers of all time, I think. And then the final book before we get to my Christmas picks is The Last Passenger by Will Dean. I have not talked about this book in a hot minute. When I remembered about this, I was like, you guys are going to be sick of me again talking about this book. But I read it a couple of years ago, over winter as well, and it is just such a good book. So we are back on a cruise ship, but there's a different concept this time. So we're following Kaz, who gets on this boat from Ireland, I believe, to New York, and they are just doing this crossing over a few days to, I guess, go on holiday. However, after a really nice first night on board, she wakes up the next day and she is completely alone. So she wakes up and her partner's not there and she's thinking, it's very bizarre. And she goes out and nobody's there anywhere. This concept just threw me in an absolute spin. Like, that was the first 10 pages of this book, and where it went next was unbelievable. I had never read anything like this before, still haven't, and I think it was just wonderful. We also have some really intense scenes because, of course, they're crossing the Atlantic and it's cold. So it's kind of a survive or die situation. This book actually pulled me out of a reading slump at the time. It was that profound and fantastic. I think if you like a really cold, gritty thriller that's going to be really unique, this is not like a snowed in situation, I do think you'll really like this. But I do know it has some mixed reviews. Some people really don't like this book for some reason. I'm still yet to have a reason, which I think is justifiable, but there you go. So you've been waiting very patiently for our 3 Christmas thriller books, and these are the only ones I would recommend, but I feel like if you haven't really picked up many, you're going to be good with just the 3. I only really read 1 or 2 a year because I can't find any good ones. The first one is, of course, Christmas Presents by Lisa Unger. I read this last year and was just so blown away. Like, I'm so glad this author's contributed into the Christmas thriller space because she just nailed it. So our female main character is the only surviving person from a serial unalive that is now behind bars. But when some similar crimes start happening again, she's worried, understandably. And then, to make things even worse, a true crime podcaster comes to try and work out exactly what's going on. And she's like, if I don't lean into this and try and help him, I'm gonna somehow look like the bad guy. And then, of course, you've got the additional layers of it's coming up to Christmas, it's snowy, and what is going to be her Christmas present this year? I have in no way, shape or form done this book justice. It is one of the best books I have read and definitely the best Christmas thriller book I've read. The next one is The Christmas Guest by Peter Swanson, and what I would give for this to be a full-length novel, because it is not, it is a novella, but it is a good 140 pages, so better than some novellas. And in this, we're following an American student who is living in London, and one of her classmates, who she's not really spoke to before, invites her to go home for the holidays with her to her family's mansion. She's like, kind of weird, but I don't really have anywhere else to go, so yeah, sure, I guess I'll go. And when she gets there, the vibes are just off from the beginning, and this book is also told in diary entries of the girl who's invited her in the first place, so you're getting a couple of points of view that were really promising. Like, I enjoyed both sides of this story. If you have low-key plans on Christmas Eve, this is what I would do, because you've not got that many pages. It's the perfect Christmassy vibes because they are like having Christmas dinner and stuff, and like down at the pub with friends they went to school with. Like, it's just really wholesome but still a thriller. And then before I tell you the final book, if you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. I am so obsessed with the fact that we're doing Bookmas this year, so I would love you guys to stick around for the rest of the journey and, of course, everything thriller book. So lastly, we have Dying for Christmas by Tammy Cohen, and I did really like this book, but it is so dark for a Christmas thriller, which I guess is what I'm trying to recommend here. Like, I did really like it, but trust me, it's dark. So our female main character goes shopping a few days before Christmas, and she's just in her element, she's fine, and she meets this guy who is like, can I buy you a coffee? And they get a chatting, and she decides to go home with him. But this is very out of character for her. She's not just like, oh, maybe I should. She just kind of does it because she's thinking, I've never been spontaneous in my entire life. And that is when he holds her captive, and not only that, gives her a present every day in the run up to Christmas, and you can imagine these presents are not nice. And he also had something very special planned for the 12th day of Christmas, and she's just fighting for her life at this point. She's just like, what have I done? I am never gonna go home with a man again. So was the men. This was very fast paced. I think if you want something you're going to be able to sit down and really fly through, this would be that. There was no real downtime at all in this book. I think because each thing was more shocking than the last, you were just like, I don't think this can get any worse for our character, and it just does. You are seriously rooting for her in this as well. I can't explain it. You are just really sat. You are sat. You're standing on business. You're like, so those 18 winter thriller books that I highly recommend you check out over the next couple of months. As I say, some of them are probably better as January reads, so don't think you have to read all of these books before Christmas. And I will see you for day 5.